Our mission at Churchill Club centers on strengthening innovation, economic growth, and social good. Something we value as an organization is the role of art in upholding human creativity, which is so crucial to the work that all of us do. Tonight, we are thrilled to debut a new site installation by our artist in residence, Pamela Davis Kivelson. Pam and her collaborative, called Neuron, are breaking ground by creating an artistic dialogue with artificial intelligence. With this installation, entitled Breadcrumbs, the portraits you see on the monitors and screens were created by an AI that was exposed to a training set and coded with aesthetic judgments of the artist. The AI's initial output was further transformed through drawing by the artist, and the process was iterated. The result is a new artistic language, abstracted and transfigured by a combination of machine learning, meaning AI, and the human mind and hand. The grid of faces on the large screens shows some of the diverse styles the AI applied to Pam's images. The video now playing shows portraits of people who inspired the artist with their work to solve huge problems we all face as a global society. The inspiration for Breadcrumbs came from observing the current trend of surveillance capitalism. This is where we draw digital self-portraits with our devices by our actions over time. Our breadcrumbs, or digital artifacts we leave, are constantly sketching us in. We don't necessarily own, control, or even know about these crumbs that trail us or how they are being used. This has happened very fast. Increasingly, people have lost trust and felt less secure. Using art as perspective on this cultural shift is a way to focus on the human in this era of interdependence with technology. Pam and Neuron, congratulations, and thank you for this wonderful contribution. Please stand so everyone knows who you are. Oh, I'm sorry, Pam is standing right in front of me. Everyone, I hope you'll introduce yourselves to Pam and the team after the show. Now, some further thanks are in order. Accenture, thank you for being our platinum sponsor tonight. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support. Thank you. Thanks also to Forbes, our co-presenter this evening. You have been an amazing partner, and your participation continues to make this event one of a kind year after year. Our gold sponsor is Alaska Airlines, who is joining us for the first time. Thank you and welcome. And our silver sponsors, British Columbia Trade and Invest, Huawei, and M12. Thank you also to our friend and collaborator, Chris Stedman, for his help in putting together tonight's panel. Our polling partner tonight is Poll Everywhere. I now invite Amy Escobar of Poll Everywhere to demonstrate the easy voting system that will be used. Please take out your cell phones and welcome Amy to the stage. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. All right, so we're super excited to partner with the Churchill Club today for this annual polling event. We're thrilled to provide the platform that allows the audience to engage with the presenters this evening and be part of the conversation. So to get started, we wanted to do a test poll. So if everyone can pull up their cell phones today, and we're going to go to pollev.com/top10 on a web browser. All right, so once we're there, we're going to vote on whether we'd prefer to be lucky or smart. Hard decision. Only one vote. All right, you can see the votes there on the screen. Most people would rather be lucky. Looks like the votes are changing a little bit there. Lots of people want to be smart. Awesome. We're going to go through the tech trends tonight, and you'll be able to see the live voting right on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Now, let's start the program by inviting Olin Keneally, Managing Director of Accenture, up to the stage to kick off the show. Come on up, Olin.
Thank you, Marcia. Good evening, everybody. Great to be here tonight. It's a lot of fun for me as a long-time fan of the Churchill Club. It's exciting to be here at what I think is one of the most fun events in the Valley. And you might think that I'm making that up, but I had tickets to the Warriors game tonight, and I'm still here. So I'll be doing a live tweet of the score on this polling thing later on. So congratulations to the Churchill Club. There's something magical about the 21st, so congrats on coming of age for this spectacular event, and I'm happy to be here to represent on behalf of Accenture. So because we ask all of our pundits to come up and talk about non-obvious trends that are going to have the potential for explosive growth in a 5-year horizon, I thought I'd look back 5 years to 2014, and I'll just pick 3 of the then predictions, trends, and let's see how they've played out. So the first one we're going to talk about is the last-second economy. And James Slavitt from Greylock predicted that this whole mobile on-demand economy, well beyond just taxis and ordering food, would change how we live, how we work, how we play. And he was spot on. I mean, we've seen it. It's pervasive in every part of our lives. And in probably the 60 seconds I've been up here, there have been about 1.6 million Tinder swipes. And a few of you guys not concentrating back there, I'm not sure what's going on. But it's something that certainly the VCs in the room have certainly done very well from. As a retail investor, I'm looking forward to my post-IPO stock improvement over the next few months in that world. The second trend that I thought was fascinating and interesting was when we start to look at the home automation space. And the trend really was thinking about the routers and the idea of the dumb router and the transformation into an intelligent network, a space where it is going to be software-driven networking that interacts with all of the devices and all of the products that are in our homes. And in that space, we've seen it. We all have our Blink and our Ring. Of course, they're now both bought by Amazon. You think about Nest and, of course, being acquired by Google. And my favorite, which, of course, is Alexa, this relentless ability to answer the really annoying questions from my little nieces that seem to have a tsunami of questions that come my way. Now Alexa takes care of that for me. And so from that perspective, again, spot on, maybe a more obvious trend, but one that is obviously phenomenally explosive and something that has come true. So another great trend. And the third one I thought that was interesting was Rebecca Lynn, who's sitting here with us tonight. And Rebecca talked a lot about data from the gut and how that's going to transform the healthcare industry through data and analytics, and really take healthcare from being what we see today as more of an art and become a science. And I think while it's not as obvious to us, it's probably going to impact every single one of us in this room in our lifetime. So make sure you eat your probiotics every morning. That's a tip from Rebecca. So with that, I think it's time for us to really start to focus on what's the next set of trends. And one thing we know for sure is innovation is never going to be slower than it is today. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from our 2019 pundits, all of them here graphically represented nicely. Thank you, guys. It looks great. So with no further ado, let me start the proceedings. Returning to the top 10 stage, let me welcome up, of course, General Partner at Canvas Ventures, Rebecca Lynn. Rebecca, this is a test. You've got to find your resemblance and sit in that seat, and so we're going to keep an eye.
Thank you.
Joining us for the first time, Aspect Ventures partner, Lauren Kolodny. Welcome up. Managing partner, Norwest Venture Partners, Jeff Crowe. Welcome up. Mayfield Managing Partner, Navin Chaddha. Come on up. There's Navin. There he is. And of course, partner at Venrock, Brian Ascher. And that is not a fashion faux pas, that is a wetsuit.
That's the best one.
Welcome up. And of course, our MCs for the evening probably don't need an introduction, but I will go ahead and do that. Our CEO of Forbes, welcome up, Mike Federle, otherwise known as Fed, Irishman with a German last name. And of course, we have our prolific author, speaker, co-founder of the Churchill Club, Forbes publisher, a man who has an ability to make me feel like an incredible underachiever, who 4 weeks ago published his book, Late Bloomers, and 2 weeks ago had the headline article in the Wall Street Journal weekend edition. Rich, come on up and join us here on stage. Okay, over to you guys. On with the show.
All right, thank you very much, Olin. That was a great introduction, and we are so delighted to be here. It has been 8 years or so, I think, Forbes, and it's great to be here. We appreciate how easy Karen makes it every year for us to participate. So thank you, Karen, and the Churchill Club for having us back. And hi, everyone. It is excellent to be here. Rich, my cohort here at Forbes and friend, and we have these five very smart VCs who are going out on the limb with their presentations. As a matter of fact, back in the green room, or the locker room as we called it, it sounded like it was going to get a little rough and tumble. There might be some good debate going on, and with that, Rich and I thought maybe we should put on our umpire referee uniforms here. So Rich, let's do so, all right?
Do you have something for us, like boxing gloves or something?
You've got paddles to hit each other with.
I thought those were for ping pong.
We expect a good, clean game tonight, but we will be here officiating. We will call foul when we see one, but we'll have an excellent time. By the way, now, Olin said he's going to give the scores to the game, but he was quickly shut down on that the Warriors are, of course, playing, as they were last year when we had this event. And several people in the audience, actually many, have said, please don't announce the score. They're videotaping it or DVRing it at home, so they don't want to know. So keep that to yourselves and keep it quiet. And what we don't want is for people to cheat on the score and leave breadcrumbs, which is an ongoing theme we see here tonight. So thank you very much, and we'll be here all night with you.
And it could be a long night.
And it could be a long night.
It's going to be, settle down. This is going to be a great night. We're always happy to do this event. And tonight is going to be especially fun. And Karen wanted Mike and I to make our own comments, since we get around in the world various conferences, various things that are covered at Forbes, and maybe throw out an idea or two and see if our ideas match up with what the panelists are going to be talking about tonight. And one thing I've observed over the last year is the kind of quiet rise of enterprise software. You look at the once and future king of the market cap tables is now Microsoft, again, as it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago it was. And you look, with all the hullabaloo about Uber last week and its disappointing IPO, valued today, I think at the end of trading day, $72 billion, people have kind of forgotten that VMware is worth $60 billion, or that ServiceNow is over $50 billion. And so I'm sort of looking into the future, and we think about digital transformation of the rest of the economy, and wondering if that will come up, or if it's going to be more consumer-oriented.
It's, Rich, it's why you write books. I think you got a good one there. But I would, perhaps it's because I'm from New York, the financial capital of the world, at least we like to think of it that way, and our investors in Forbes are in Hong Kong. A lot of the conversation I'm involved in is cryptocurrencies. And I believe we're coming out of the crypto winter. It's going to change its name to digital assets. And we're going to see companies, we've seen Chase, we're hearing about Facebook possibly with their coin. We're going to see this really become a major and significant force, which is obviously disintermediating a lot of the middle folks in the finance world. So I don't know if that's going to play out here as much. I remember last year I mentioned blockchain and everyone laughed at me. So we'll see where the thoughts go on the panel tonight.
Well, since we've already gone halfway rogue, why not go the full rogue? At the end of this, while we're tallying up the votes, some 5 hours from now, 2 hours from now, probably, precisely, because it's so well scripted, Mike and I are going to present our own Rich and Mike Gold Star Award for the trend we think best represents the criteria of this event. The not obvious, which is hard to do, and we'll have the hugest, the biggest impact. Who wrote hugest on it? Where did hugest come? Have the hugest impact.
Throw a flag on
hugest impact on the economy and society, and we'll see how that works out. Audience, please do not fail to vote for every speaker's trend, by the way, on the Poll Everywhere app. It's up to you to select the top trend, and I think we'd really like to get a true read from the 400 people in the room. This is the Gold Star Award. We're going to do it while you're voting, so we're not going to try to put our thumb on the scale, or maybe we will a little bit. Well, heck, we should. We sit higher than they do, can't we?
We'll see how the audience
We'll see how
votes.
it works out.
Definitely vote. But last year's trend wizard was Tom Tungas from with the Hunt for Authenticity, about the growth opportunities around determining what is authentic and what is not. So let's get started and hear what comes out on top this year. Now, here are the ground rules. Each speaker will deliver 2 trends based on the following criteria. 1, they are not obvious today, and 2, we may see explosive impact in these areas in about 3 to 5 years. Now, here's how it'll play out. Rich and I will give you a brief description of the trends one by one. Then the owner of the trend gets 2.5 minutes, and we will stay to the clock here on the stage, to persuade everyone in the room that his or her trend is the top trend. The panel will vote and comment with their paddles. The speaker gets 1 minute then. Red, they don't agree. Green, they do agree. And then the speaker gets 1 minute to rebut. The audience then will vote, and we'll see where we end up. Now, don't forget, pundits, the magical wizard wand will go to tonight's winner. It's, as I was saying back in the green room, that's akin to a Nobel Prize or the Pulitzer or something very big for the Churchill Club.
Can I have my book? See,
someone needs to plug this,
yeah,
right?
Someone needs to plug it. My publisher said it would kill me if I didn't use this opportunity. So never mind. I'm just going to put it right up here. It's going to be nice and handsome, facing the audience. Okay, let's dive in. Trend number 1, the rise of functional medicine. It's Rebecca's. Keto, paleo, and gluten-free are here to stay. Look out for one-stop shop companies that facilitate functional medicine and do more than just provide diet or supplements, but create packaged, actionable results based on diagnostics, diet, and diagnostics again. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you for that. So we have a big problem here in the US. According to JAMA, there's a Journal of American Medicine, 45% of adults in this country are obese or near obese, and 60% of adults have at least one chronic illness. And the current approaches in modern and primary care are just not cutting it and solving the problem, and they're often making it worse. Functional medicine is the answer. It's often referred to as holistic or integrative medicine, and the point of it is to determine how and why the illness actually occurred in the first place instead of just trying to put a pill into it. And they heal by addressing actually the root cause of an issue on an individual basis. And this can include things like sleep, diet, environmental toxins and mold, and lifestyle. Functional medicine also has a focus, per 2014, between the gut and the brain. And in the last 10 years, they've actually found a new lymphatic system in the body that provides a direct link between the gut and the brain connection. And they use data based upon what's happening there, as well as your personal genetics. Things like the MTHFR genetic mutation, 30% of you in this room have it. And if you do, you shouldn't be taking a normal B vitamin. You should be taking something that's methylated. And things in the blood, such as a vitamin D deficiency, which a huge amount of people have, which normal medicine doesn't really test for, and which is the #1 correlated element to a host of disease, including MS, Alzheimer's, and arthritis. We've already started to see this trend explode. Meditation apps, including Calm and Headspace, the rise of supplements personalized to you with Care of Ritual, Bulletproof, and Thrive Market, and a cult of following with Goop and Well and Good. And we've also seen that people try to dismiss this, saying this is not rooted in science, and it actually very much is. Unfortunately, it takes about 17 years for things in studies to make it into mainstream medicine. And the good news is that those studies happened in the early 2000s. Real doctors, such as Dr. Terry Wall, who reversed her own multiple sclerosis diagnosis, Dr. Mark Hyman at the Cleveland Clinic, and Dr. David Breedson at the Institute of Aging, who wrote the book, The End of Alzheimer's, are all behind it. And so in the future, look forward to the rise of functional medicine to solve some of our major health concerns in our era. And it'll happen in the next 3 to 5 years. There we go.
Okay, let's go down the line, starting with you, Lauren. Good idea or bad idea? Give us your 1-minute opinion.
Are we going to vote?
We vote
red
first.
panel
We
or
vote
red
first.
panel?
We can vote for
You
ourselves.
think I've not done this before?
Vote and hold them very high so everyone in the back can see them.
Red or green?
Agree or disagree? All right, 2 agrees, and, well, you're going to agree, of course, but 2 agrees and 2
You got to vote for
disagrees.
yourself.
Okay, now we'll start down the line. Lauren, you like it? Tell us why.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a ton of sense. I mean, some of these fad diets have taken off for a reason. They work for some people, but not for all. And I think we see, these come into trend and then out of trend. But a lot of them are rooted in science. And I think that the functional medicine approach that really drives a more personalized understanding to sort of why a particular diet may or may not work for you is what we need. And so, I mean, I think about when I was growing up, fat was considered terrible for everyone, and now fat is cool. But in reality, it's good for some people and not for others. And I think that the more holistic functional approach, coupled with new personalized data from genomics and biome data and glucose monitors, make for a really interesting and more personalized solution to many of diseases.
Jeff?
So I actually think that there is a lot to say for functionalized medicine and functional medicine. And I think it's the combination of data, the personalization. I think these different health practices, I think, actually can have significant impact. The only reason I actually had it as a red was simply that I think that the pace of change in the medical community is just so slow when in terms of the average GP or other doctors actually rolling out with of functional medicine that I think it just takes a long, long, long time for the medical community to kind of change the way they train and they behave. I have a daughter in medical school right now. I can tell you they're not teaching functional medicine in medical school the way Rebecca articulates it. So I actually think it has a lot of merit to it. I just think will it be prevalent in 5 years? I think it's just going to take a lot longer for that to kind of roll through the medical system.
Navin.
Yes, I think I commend this trend, right? And I'm a personal believer in it. But the purpose here is to take a lens outside of Silicon Valley, right? So I think the technology exists, and there'll be a lot of companies going to go after this problem. But one of the things, having done a lot of consumer investments, we have seen it's hard to change consumer behavior. It's hard to change the behavior of the practitioner, as you said. One of the things people care about is, hey, am I paying for this, or is the insurer paying for this? And if the insurer is paying for this, you need efficacy. You need to prove results that this is actually making change, right? When I take a drug, I have diabetes, you can control it, I keep away from the hospital. And then finally, I'll say this in a jokingly way, one of the most successful person in the world, Warren Buffett, says, hey, I invest in sugar, I invest in Coca-Cola. We all know it's poison, but it's addictive, it's cheap, everybody wants it. And that's an example of human behavior is impossible to change. Even water comes with all kinds of sugar, right? Artificial sugar, non-artificial sugar. And I think that's where I struggle when we are trying to go for these things. Are these niche solutions? And when we say, yes, these are being used, are they being used in mainstream? Are these for like tens of millions of people, 50 million people, 100 million people? Or 100,000 people. So that's where I struggle with these things.
We need to get to Brian. Brian?
I liked it because we're already seeing the tip of the iceberg on this trend. There's a company out there called Virta that through a daily diagnostic, a little pinprick blood draw, and coaching can reverse type 2 diabetes. No drugs. Just take your blood every day, run it through the diagnostic. It's a digital coach and an online coach controlling your diet, and it cures type 2 diabetes. And I hear you on behavior change is hard, but when you get letters and see the tears on people's face who thought they were going to have to take insulin every day for the rest of their lives and they're cured, I think that's going to catch on.
Thank you for that. My turn? So I hear you, and it's sort of the VC response I would expect. I grew up in the Midwest. Sorry.
We think we're
I grew up, except for Brian, I grew up at Procter & Gamble, right? I know P&G is actually the one that planted in everyone's head here that sugar was okay and you should eat like basically poisonous things like Wesson oil and Crisco and stuff that should never be in anybody's diet, by the way, and that somehow animal fat was bad. P&G paid the American Heart Association in the 1950s $1.7 million to basically go against fat and to support sugar. So and there's absolutely no clinical studies to support that fat is bad for you, like absolutely none. And so there is a big media piece behind it. I totally agree with you. But what we're seeing are, let me just read off the billion-dollar companies in the space to make it mainstream.
We need to go to a vote in
Sure.
20 seconds.
Carev, Ritual, Bulletproof, Thrive, Calm, Headspace, Goop. They're all billion-dollar plus companies that have already hit mainstream America. And quite frankly, I think people are sick of doctors making them sick. You know, prescribing statins to you is not a good idea. It totally kills your coenzyme Q. And people are tired of it. And I think the Midwest has spoken.
The Midwest. Now we go to the vote, right?
Yep. Okay, let's, the rise of functional medicine. Will it happen as Rebecca described it in the next 3 to 5 years?
There it is.
What are your thoughts?
I think I'm in agreement with the majority. My daughter's already way into this, so I'm a green panel on this one.
Okay.
I think you'd find the votes reversed in red state country, though.
That's close.
It's split like ours.
It's hardening up like your arteries will if you eat Wesson oil.
All right, we
Or
have
Crisco's very bad.
15 more seconds for those last-minute voters. All right, it looks set. Yeah, think so. I think we're good. Very good. All right, let's jump right into trend 2. Flexible fertility management will become mainstream. The U.S. is in the early stages of a seismic cultural shift around how and when people have families. As more women delay having children to stay in the workforce, as the average life expectancy increases, and as more same-sex couples start families, flexible fertility services will become commonplace. Lauren, tell us more.
Yeah, so as the millennial on the panel, I thought it would only make sense for me to talk about putting off having babies. But seriously, 2017 was the first year in US history that more women had babies in their 30s than in their 20s. Think about that for a second. It's a really big change. And as life expectancy continues to increase by generation, and we start to see the economic impact of women staying in the workforce longer, this trend is here to stay. Women who wait to have children have salaries 9% higher for each year they wait. That means a woman who waits until she's 35 years old to start a family earns 45% more than if she started her family when she was 30. Family composition is changing dramatically. For example, the number of same-sex couples raising children is up 74% from its 2000 numbers. Unfortunately, today fertility treatments are extremely expensive, tough to navigate, and inefficient. 70% of people go into meaningful debt. One cycle of IVF costs about $15,000. But successful IVF requires multiple cycles for most people, which means the average successful IVF costs $61,000. And surrogacy is at minimum $90,000. So next, yeah, that's the right slide. Increasing demand coupled with the clear economic benefits will drive more affordable and accessible fertility services. FinTech has a really big role to play in this. We're already seeing a lot of innovation around the way that financing is serving this industry. In addition, I think there will be new savings instruments for fertility, almost like a 529 for college education. Increasing demand and clear ROI will drive affordability because employers are going to start providing this as benefits, and I don't just mean Google and Facebook. We're a little jaded here in Silicon Valley. This does not exist more broadly right now. And I think treatment care models are going to improve significantly. In particular, clinics are going to become more efficient and even automated. And science is obviously playing a big role too. Genetic screening on embryos is improving, as is measuring the health of eggs, which will allow for fewer fertility treatments to result in success. I think Gen Z is going to become more proactive, and as they see millennials struggle with this, and actually start egg freezing. And software is going to play an important role in eliminating some of the confusion by providing tailored fertility navigation. Next slide. So what will this amount to?
Hasta luego.
Yeah. The biological clock is not going to matter the same way it does today.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, panelists, hold your paddle high. Red or green? Hold them high so they can see them in the back. Oh, look at that, a unanimous green across the line. Brian, why don't you start down at that end and keep your comments to within 1 minute if you could.
Sure. I went into this wanting to say it's obvious, and then I got shamed into realizing, okay, it's obvious at Google and Facebook, and there's a few startups, but we're still so early across all of America in this trend, and it will happen, and again, we're probably at the, just the beginning, so I agree.
Very good. Navin?
I agree too, right? I think this is much needed. I think the only thing that needs to get seen is what's the business model, how does the pricing come down, and do employers or even insurers take this into account? Like if you're going to be a growing society with a growing mindset, it remains to be seen, but I'm a big believer in this trend. Thank you.
Jeff?
So I agree with it. I agree with a lot of the specific forces that are kind of coming to bear on this that Laura mentioned. I also think it ends up being a national imperative for the country. I think it's a big deal for America that we not go the way of what's happening in countries like Russia or Spain, or where populations are starting to actually shrink and growth is being questioned. And so I think it's going to get a lot more. It's not only an issue that I think couples are going to be considering very seriously. I think you're going to see over the next 5 years a lot of broader societal and frankly government and economic tailwinds pushing behind trying to do something about this, because we're going to realize it's going to become a big national problem for us. So I think there's going to be a lot of more broad national focus on it as well.
Yeah, interesting. Rebecca?
So I've looked at this a lot, and I don't disagree, and I've wanted to love it is like a coming trend, but I haven't seen it. You know, I come from the Midwest. Most of my family is back in the Midwest. We come in a day when Alabama just voted in the toughest, abortion laws ever, right? And guess what? It really is a New York Bay Area thing. It's not even a Fresno thing, right? It is New York and Bay Area. And it is, in San Francisco, they'll pay for a sex change, right? And in most places, they'll pay for your Viagra, and they won't pay for, like, birth control pills, right? And so I think this is a real issue. It's a real issue for educated women. Half of the women graduating from Harvard aren't working full-time 10 years out. And half the MDs that are actually at women minted as medical doctors don't work full-time within, I think, 5 years. They're half-time. And it's causing a real issue, right? But I don't think this is an outside the Bay Area problem, I think, or a New York problem. I think I've jumped into this looking at financing solutions and things like that. It actually, for me personally, was more of a functional medicine issue. I had 3 miscarriages between 2 kids because of a bad thyroid that my primary couldn't somehow catch. And so there are a lot of those, blocking and tackling issues as well that sort of factor into this. So yes, it's a big problem. I see it with my friends in the Bay Area. I don't see it with people back in the Midwest.
I'll qualify that as a Midwestern green. You did hold up green, right?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I was green.
Good. Now let's go to the crowd and vote. Oh, rebuttal. Sorry, Lauren.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'll keep it
What are you gonna
brief.
rebut?
I would
Yeah,
just
okay.
Rebecca, I appreciate your commentary. I will say that, and it's all anecdotal, but my husband is from rural Virginia, and we have friends from there that have taken out second mortgages on their homes in order to pay for fertility treatments. And so I think, the problem varies in different geographies, but I really do think in looking at the data and this anecdotal experience that it's a countrywide problem, and it's going to get more prominent. So.
Good. Well, voting has begun, but keep it going. We'll give it a little bit of time here.
What are your thoughts, Mike?
I think I agree, it's a global issue, and I thought it was very interesting, the comments on it's also an economic and maybe even security issue in terms of encouraging continued population rather than reverse population.
Yeah, about a month ago on stage in LA, I interviewed Mike Milken, and he said something provocative. He said, social science is the best market forecaster. And when you look at these big problems, eventually solutions are found to address these big problems. And I agree that it may not be as popular in Fresno as the San Francisco Bay Area, but Singapore and Hong Kong, and there are so many places around the world that this problem seems to be a ready market for this idea.
Very good. We'll give it a few more seconds. Nope, we just ran out of time. So it looks like 57-43 is a winner. So we're great.
Trend number 3, real estate is often listed as one of the last sectors to be impacted by technology. Get ready for some major changes. The way we buy, sell, lease, build, move to, live in, furnish, and secure our physical spaces are become faster, simpler, and cheaper for both our homes and our offices. How we utilize space will continue to dramatically change in the next few years due to macroeconomic shifts, on-demand preferences, and lack of space in urban areas. Jeff, take it away.
So let me start by saying why I think this is not an obvious trend, and that is, let's start with just homeowners. We'll talk about residential and commercial, but for homeowners, if you go to buy a house today, other than maybe looking at some listings through Zillow or something, basically buying a house today is pretty darn close to the way buying a house was a generation ago. If you go to rent an apartment today, again, other than online listings, renting an apartment today, moving in and furnishing it, pretty much the same as it was a generation ago. And by the way, in the commercial side, for those of us who are in venture capital, our portfolio companies find offices and sign long-term leases and take months to move in, have a lot of CapEx, and I've had multiple companies go through that this year. Same as it was a generation ago. So in fact, I would argue that the real estate industry, the motto is same as it ever was. And these are trillion-dollar industries, and both commercial and both residential, that we're talking about. Yet, I think if you look underneath the covers, there are changes that are occurring that are being driven by software, hardware, building design, business processes that are going to really become prevalent over the next 5 years. Let me give you some examples of those. So, getting rid of the friction. You're going to be able to sell your house with just a couple of clicks and actually get the cash in 3 days. You'll be able to buy a house in a very similarly frictionless fashion. You're going to be talking about trading up a house the way you trade up a car. That is starting to happen today. That will be available in the major 50 metropolitan areas around the US in 5 years. It will be prevalent. In some cities, it'll be 10 to 20% of the homes are going to be bought and sold this way. Going cheaper, you're going to see millennials in cities living in purpose-built buildings that are basically called co-living, where it's a smaller physical footprint for the bedroom, but larger common areas, all managed through software, better amenities, better group activities. It's cheaper rent for the individual, but it's more dollars per square foot for the landlord. That is going to become prevalent in the next 5 years. Virtually decorating your room. Take 5 pictures or 8 pictures from around the room and have software do a 3D rendering of your actual room, decorate it according to your preferences. So you can do a 3D tour of it as opposed to getting random designs from an interior designer and go, I want to buy that, I want to buy that, I want to buy that. Cheaper security. You're going to secure your house with $20 cameras and a $20 motion sensor. Gone is going to be spending hundreds of dollars or $50 a month to secure your house. That will be cheaper. It is, by the way, same thing is true in the commercial side. It is all about flexibility, lower cost, speed of transaction, and transparency.
All right, fellow panelists, yea or nay? Hold them high.
Ooh, a split decision.
Yeah. Okay, why don't we start on the other end? Brian, that was a pretty resolute red holding in your hands.
Well, I feel like there's already been massive change, and Zillow is now like a sport. We watch the Warriors and we check the home prices of our neighbors. And agents will tell you that they have to become digital marketing experts and the common application. And so I hear you, there's a lot more to go. I totally agree with that. I just think that what hasn't already been done over 20 years of e-commerce and online agency are the really hard parts, the friction prone. Like, I don't want to sell my house in 3 clicks. There are certain things that are just so important, you got to slow down and do it right. And there'll be a little bit of enablement from digital, but like, I don't want to buy a house in 3 clicks. I don't want to sell it in 3.
Okay, that's your minute. Very good, Navin.
Yeah,
and all of you, keep one eye occasionally on that clock. So.
Yeah, I'm agreeing on this, right? The real estate is one of the biggest market, doesn't use more technology. Primarily, the innovation has been more on the information side with Zillow and Redfin. But as we look at the millennial demographic, and as an example, millennials are changing their homes and apartments 10 to 15 times before they get settled. And just simple needs like, hey, what kind of furniture do I need? Are they going to keep buying it, or do they going to get it as a service? Similarly, right, like what do I do with my art? Food is a huge issue for people. So I think beyond the buying and selling of homes, I think there are very interesting problems to be solved here. And the question is whether it happens in 2-3 years. But for the millennials, I think this is a big trend that we'll see.
Well done. Okay, Lauren.
Yeah, I look at this similar to how I look at sort of the fintech category more broadly, which is the last 10 to 15 years have really been characterized by bringing a lot of existing, in fintech's case, financial products online, in real estate, bringing existing business models online. So better advertising, yes, better discovery and content, but still fundamentally the same. And I guess what has me more convinced that we might be at an inflection point in terms of really transforming the fundamental sort of behavior and business models is when you look at companies like Jeff's company, where he's an investor, Open Door, or Knock, where you're starting to see real momentum around fundamentally different models for buying and selling homes. So I think we might be there, and I think potentially within the next 5 years, it will have a meaningful impact.
We've seen a lot of change. I mean, Zillow is a sport. Whenever you go anywhere, people are popping open, the app to see what the home prices are. I think it's fundamentally different if the home is, people feel it to be an asset that they're buying and selling versus their home. And so millennials, I also was younger at one point in time. I probably lived in 10 different places. It's not that different, right? But they're going to one day have kids. And guess what? When they have those kids, letting go of that house becomes a much more emotional issue. The place we lived in, it took us 6 months to convince the buyer to really let go of it. And I think for people that, if it's their actual home, it's got that emotional piece to it. If you're buying and selling, a single family home on, we're in Roofstock, for example, and that's a very different thing. It's like a physical asset that you can trade. So I think, we're seeing some of it, but I think when you get into single family homes, it's a different story, largely where people are living in their own homes. I do love the co-living piece of it, though. I think that the common collective, all those people, Hub House and others, I think that's just, it's great. It's just like, post-college dorms.
Okay.
That makes a ton of sense.
Jeff, you got a minute. You had a mixed verdict here, and you've got a minute to rebut your critics.
So it actually wouldn't surprise me at all. It didn't surprise me that people in the Bay Area wouldn't be saying, hey, I don't want to sell my home in a few clicks. This is actually a trend that isn't hitting the coasts first. This is a trend that's happening in the middle of the country first. And in fact, thousands of families are doing this in Phoenix and in Raleigh and San Antonio, as we speak. I mean, this is a thing, and it is starting to happen. So I actually think there has been way too much friction in the system for too long, and you're seeing a lot of families. It's not everybody, but I say prevalent. 20-30% of homes in some of these cities in the south and central parts of the country are going to be bought and sold this way in 5 years from now.
All right, now, audience, it's your chance to vote on Jeff's proposal. And we start out in the dead heat here, and look at it, we got a horse race.
Not convincing folks.
Jeff, I was hoping you were going to go towards a technology that allowed me to get a house in Atherton for 1/10 of the price.
Close.
Instantly,
We have time.
with one click.
Faster.
Well, if you want something else that you're not likely to believe in, there is going to be, in 5 years, you're going to see your bed and dresser drawers stored on ceilings. Mark, you heard it here first, folks. Not on the floor, not on the walls, stored on ceilings. Voice controlled, bring it down at night. Really, really cool stuff happening in real estate.
Pick up all the shit on the floor.
Really cool stuff.
See, if you were Mitch Kapor, and you put $75,000 into Uber, and you're now worth an extra $325 million from that investment, then it wouldn't be an issue, Mike.
There you go, exactly. All right, I think we're done with that.
All right.
51-49.
Boy, that was
Pretty split.
this one's going to have to come down to the hanging chads, I think.
All right, on to trend 4. Biology as technology will reinvent trillion-dollar industries. So biology as technology uses design and programming to save planetary and human health. It's reinventing trillion-dollar industries in food, fuels, materials, diagnostics, therapeutics, computers, and more. Navin, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. I think the purpose of my trend is to bring science back to Silicon Valley. We talk a lot about software, we talk a lot about e-commerce, we talk a lot about this being media, but let's get back to our roots of what Silicon Valley made Silicon Valley. So let's start with what is the problem we are facing today. It's in both planetary and human health. With the rise in global population and people's incomes going up, especially in developing countries, consumption is doubling every 10 to 15 years, and it's depleting our natural resources. At the same time, as Rebecca said, there are more sick and obese people, leading to a higher mortality rate. If you look at this slide, I look at the evolution of biology the same as the evolution of mankind. The left side is the monkey, the middle is the chimpanzee, I think, and then it's the human being. The 1970s was the birth of the biotech, where biotech companies spurred use of biologics like insulin to develop new therapies to treat diseases. What's my prediction? My prediction is we are entering a global and golden era of biology, where biology now is a platform like information technology. With all the innovations that are happening in things like CRISPR, DNA sequencing, gene editing, cell engineering, and bioprinting, not only will we fix things, but we'll also make new things. So bio will continue to solve therapies, and not only will we treat diseases, we'll cure them forever. But now, I don't know whether these things will happen in the next 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years. There are already startups which have gone public, which are making meat without the cow, cheese without the milk, wood without trees, whiskey from molecules, this is for people who like alcohol, silk fibers from bacteria, jet fuels from sugar and corn, concrete from spores, leather from mushrooms, and even skin cream with engineered bacteria. At the same time, bio might reinvent information technology. Our friends at Microsoft are working on how to store information in a few grams of DNA equivalent to the entire data center. So if I have to summarize, biology as a technology will have massive impact to not only save our planet, it will save lives, and as a result, reinvent trillion-dollar industries. Thank you.
Right on the dot. Yeah, oh, very good. Panelists, put your paddles high. Oh, look at this, little indecision. Put them high, please, put them high. Ooh, 3-1. Put it, Lauren,
Lots
hold
of
on.
reds, it's good.
Yeah, there you go. All right, well, we have 3-1, and why don't we start down on this side, Rebecca? What's your commentary?
I mean, I think the commentary is I would also love to bring science back to Silicon Valley. I'm a chemical engineer at heart, so I can make, beer bombs, booze, and all kinds of different drugs. But I think it's a timing issue. I mean, there are been a lot of these really exciting companies that can make things at laptop, sort of benchtop scale, and then struggle to really do it at high production volumes and bring it to market. So I want to see it. So it was a hard vote, because I do agree with you, but I think it's a timing issue.
Lauren?
Yeah, if I could have done the half panel on this one, I probably would have. I was on the fence. I think I totally believe in the theme, and I think longer term we're going to see massive innovation on this front. The reason I gave it a green is I think most of this is more than 5 years out, but when you look at the subset around food that Navin mentioned, that's where I see a ton of innovation today and like real productized offerings, obviously. I mean, you look at the Impossible and a number of others, I think that we're starting to see that become real. So on that dimension, I'm supportive of this trend.
Jeff?
So I think it was just, for me, a timing issue. I think directionally I would agree with Navin, but I think these trends, well, I think people are starting to working on them today, but I think they'll have a massive global impact, with some exceptions like Impossible. Some massive global impact, I think it's more than 5 years. And so for me, it was just really a strict interpretation of the timing rule, and saying that I think it'll take more than 5 years for this to play out. I think if you said, hey, what's a 20-year, 10 to 20-year-old, then I'd just say one of the biggest trends that I think is going to come out of the whole innovative world will be this, if you take a really long-term view.
I agree. It's purely a timing issue, and there are three things that hold it back. The FDA and clinical trials, the expense and the approval process is so slow. The cost curve for some of these things, we have such a long way to go on the manufacturability and scalability of things like synthetic protein. And then lastly, while we can read DNA cheaply now and we can even begin to write it, there's so much about human biology we don't know. We just don't know what all that DNA means. And it's going to take a lot of time to figure that out.
Navin?
Absolutely right. I think what I would say is some of these things we're already seeing with the IPOs of some of the food companies. So those are here now. Similarly, a lot of the material things where there's no need for FDA approval is beginning to happen in developing countries because there's a lot of pressure as you build housing, as you go to fuels, right? Like you don't have natural resources. So things like Amaris and others are beginning to get traction outside the US. But then I really like this point, right? There's a famous consulting company, AT&T asked them, hey, will wireless ever happen? And they said no, and the rest was history. So my belief is, it's good to be contrarian. Some things will happen out of these things in the next 1 year. We are seeing a huge pipeline of companies going public. The biggest pipeline of companies which are going public in the pharma space are also bio, which are trying to cure diseases, not just treat them. And in many other areas, there will be opportunity, but it remains to be seen on what will happen. And I think there'll be a continuum, as we have all agreed. There'll be things in 1 year timeline, 3 year timeline, 5 year, 10, and 20. But I think this is the future. Thank you.
That's great. Out to the audience, vote. We're just getting some good mo.
Yeah, I wonder about some of the informed criticism about the regulatory apparatus that stands in the way. And then I wonder if companies will be able to penetrate that in the same way Uber and Airbnb penetrated or ran around the regulations in their space. They simply move so fast and they provided benefits so tangible that the regulators felt powerless to regulate.
Yeah, I think it's good. I do wonder on the timeline on it. I don't doubt the notion that it's going to change things going forward. All right, we'll give it a 5 or 10 more seconds. Get your votes in. I believe this is our top vote getter at the moment, right?
How about that?
All right, let's shut down the polls. 60-40 in agreement. Good job, Navin. Good, Brian.
All right.
That's why venture is called Black Swan.
Trend number 5. VR, AI, bioelectronic wearables will program our emotions in healthful and intentional ways. Consumers wake up to our unhealthy addiction to the dopamine hits of social media. Immersive, non-invasive wearables biohack us into states of relaxation, mindfulness, and peak performance without ads. Brian, over to you.
All right. Anyone here concerned about social media addiction and its influence on our brains and that of our children? Our inherent need to feel significant and our innate desire for social approval has smartphone users checking their phone 80 times a day and spending 134 minutes a day on social media. We all know this is bad for us, causing loss of focus, depression, anxiety, social disconnection, which is really ironic for social media, and loss of privacy. Yet engineers have so cleverly designed social media and messaging apps to optimize daily active users and ad revenue that most of us are powerless to quit. But smart entrepreneurs are going to take all that we've learned about digital engagement, immersive experiences, and the human brain to build new products optimized for psychological health rather than creating addictions to drive ad views. We've already talked about mindfulness apps like Headspace and Calm and how popular they are. It's great. They're simply podcasts. Within 5 years, there will emerge virtual reality, bioelectronic wearables that engage our senses so completely that they flood the brain with positive input, hacking us into states of calm, mindfulness, happiness, peak performance, and flow. And they'll do this non-invasively and without drugs. VR, virtual reality, is already being used to treat phobias and pain. And as devices improve, they become more affordable. And we better understand bioelectronic feedback loops and how to tune them. And application creators are attracted to the growing installed base. We're going to start using these new devices as part of daily habits, much the way millions of people do yoga or try to meditate. And these are practices that haven't changed in 5,000 years. So it feels inevitable to me that immersive technology can push mindfulness and human psychology forward by building on business models aimed towards wellness, not monopolizing our attention to feed us more ads. Think of this prediction as Deepak Chopra meets Ready Player One.
Oh, very good. Well, that ought to get the paddles flashing, so let's flash our paddles, flash them high so the audience can see.
Hold them high, 3-1, huh?
Okay. Well,
My first or last?
let's go down the line.
Me first? Okay.
Rebecca?
So, I mean, we're already seeing some of this, right? With the Calm app, for example, and there was already Headspace, which was $1 billion plus company, and now Calm. And literally what you do is you watch this little bubble kind of, you take a deep breath as the bubble expands, and then you like let it out as the bubble contracts, and it's $1 billion company. And, but we're seeing this, and this all goes to mindfulness and well-being, and stress reduction, right? I mean, you laugh, it's a huge company. And so I do think this is going to be something that people sort of look for and will pay for.
Yeah, I guess it's true that there are some very significant applications in mindfulness, and I think that they are quite helpful, although I would also say that I don't think that private market valuations are necessarily indicative of impact, especially in this space. I think that the wearables, to me, it's sort of the antithesis of mindfulness and disconnection. And when you couple that, when you look at the data around wearables today and their ability to really make behavioral change, so like fitness apps, most people look at the data and don't change their behavior. Many studies have shown that. Also, the adoption of wearables has kind of flattened over the last 2 years, and so for all of those reasons, I am doubtful that this trend will materialize in 5 years.
So sometimes, I don't know if any of you ever remember the Bob Newhart show, where this person comes in, and Bob's a psychologist, the person comes in, they have a serious problem, and Bob's advice is just stop it. And sometimes I feel like that's what we ought to just be doing with social media. It's just like, so in response to social media, we're going to have some bio device that's going to put us into virtual reality and send deep messages into our brains, and I'm going like, whoa, man, that's my response to social media. It's like, maybe I just can take a walk outside in the park or something. So I think it's going to end up being, I don't think this is going to be a pervasive way in the next 5 years to counter impact what Brian very accurately describes, I think, as a deep, deep problem caused by social media and cell phones. I don't end up thinking this is going to be a pervasive way to answer it. Maybe on the fringes, but certainly not for mainstream Americans.
I think I end up in the same place. I love to use these things, but as I look at mainstream adoption, the issue is the moment you go to wearables besides Fitbit and the Apple Watches, these things are like clunky, right? Like basically using them is not easy. The price points are high, and we're still trying to solve the basic problems on packaging, pricing, positioning. And since we are talking about 3 to 5 years, I'm just trying to wonder which company is incented to essentially make this happen, right? So I completely believe that there is a need. People in Silicon Valley can afford this stuff. We have resources. We can go to the right places and get it. And I love, by the way, the Calm and the other things, right? But they're simple. So simplicity, ease of use. But the moment it gets into AR, VR, AI, and this bioelectronic, my head spins, right? Like, and I'm better meditating on my own without any of these things.
Okay, Brian, you have what's left on the clock here to defend your thesis.
Sure. So I think the term wearables in this case was misconstrued. I do not believe that people will be wearing them day in, day out on their glasses. This is virtual reality, fully immersive, for 15-minute hits a day, kind of like you try to meditate, and it's really hard. We all suck at it. And so if you have a 3D visual environment that is responding to you, bringing your biorhythm down into a state of calm, that's much more what I'm talking about. And I think there's a massive demand for this. I think the reason that EDM festivals has become so pervasive is because people go and they lose themselves for a couple of days and they feel different. I don't think this is going to be a cure or a stop social media. This isn't an alternative. This is that 15-minute a day, maybe twice a day way to reset. And we could just do better than sitting cross-legged in the dark.
All right, audience, it's up to you. Well,
Where's your creativity?
I feel the need to put my thumb on the scale on Brian's side because every high-performance sports team is moving in this direction. When you're trying to optimize how you're preparing athletes for a competition, and I think the only mistake you made, Brian, was to tie it to social media. There are any number of things that are adding to anxiety, depression, stress in American society today. An explosion of traffic. You look at something I wrote about in my book, that the incredible pressure that kids and families are under to get great test scores and grades to get into elite schools. People are stressed out. Millennials are unbelievably stressed out.
Rich, if I might, I'm not sure I'm allowed to break the rules here, but the point of social media wasn't that's the only thing making us feel like crap. It's that is proof that we can use software to make us feel like crap. We can use it to make us feel good, too.
Okay.
I will say, just 1 minute, I have a confession to make. I actually shared this one last night with my sales staff, and you lost them at no ad, so that was it. But so thanks. That was a good one. Though.
Yeah, that was a good one.
All right, as we go to trend number 6, 70-30 against in that one. As we go to trend number 6, so now in round 2 of our competition here, and trend number 6 is distributed workforces will become the norm. Facilitated by collaboration software like Notion, Zoom, etc., most dev teams will have a global presence. Eastern Europe and the Balkans will be hubs for outsourcing, which in turn will create domestic tech industries in the next 20 years. So Rebecca, explain that one to us.
Yeah, so my trend here is that remote workforces work. And at Google, there's a couple of data points to back this up. So at Google, 48% of all meetings within Google already happen across multiple cities, multiple geographies within Google. And Google, as you can imagine, has done a lot of studies. They found no difference in effectiveness, performance ratings, or promotions in people working in different locations across teams. This month, Stripe announced that their 5th engineering hub would be entirely remote, and they weren't planning on it, but what they found was that remote employees have outperformed all of their expectations. And they pointed out that things that have come up, like Google Docs, Slack, GitHub, and Zoom, are how most of the work is happening anyway. So even if people are in the same location for the social media piece, they aren't really talking to each other. So why pay for the expense of real estate, set them all in one spot, and have them just on Slack anyway? Agile work models are becoming absolutely the norm. Upwork states that 69% of millennials and Gen Z managers already are allowing teams to work remotely and are 2.5 times more likely to use freelancers on an ongoing sort of permanent basis. And Upwork also believes that 2 out of every 5 FTs in the future will be working remotely in the next 3 years. There's my timing. There you are. Okay. On the other side of the hand, people are really happy telecommuting. This is something that comes from both sides. And according to a survey by remote.com, 60% of all people surveyed said if they could, they would leave their current job and work part-time or work full-time remote for the same money. And the other major drivers, there's a couple other things fueling this. One is that it's really hard to find good talent, and good talent is becoming much more specialized. So being able to find that talent in other locations is very helpful. And also the whole emergence of co-working. So it makes a ton more sense to save the money on office furniture and let people work remotely and then come into the office and meet at a very nice, WeWork facility with lots of coffee and facilities provided. And this does extend already far beyond tech into accounting, finance, marketing, and the like. And so, again, the trend here is that, watch for distributed workforces becoming the norm, not the exception, in the next 3 to 5 years, and also additional tech to sort of pop up to support that. I'm gonna die.
Very good, right at the bell. Hold your paddles high, panelists. All right,
There we
a
go.
3-1, 4. Why don't we mix it up this time, and Jeff, take it from the middle.
Sure. So I voted for it. I mean, I think everything that Rebecca said, I think, is pretty straightforward and is true. It's demographic trends, it's skill trends, it's technology trends. All of that is true, I think, is basically making distributed workforces a reality. If I had, the only thing I would quibble with, I think, with what Rebecca said is I actually think it's here already. I mean, I think it's here now. I think it's a thing today. And I'm not sure it's non-obvious. I think so our portfolio companies are all doing it already, and they're not even big companies. Companies of 20, 50, 100 people are already distributed around the country and around the world with dev centers in the Ukraine and Pakistan and in where Argentina, Costa Rica, that's already happening. So it's like there's no way I could say red because I think it's already a thing.
Brian, what do you think then at the end?
I have the same argument, but I think when it's that obvious, you are supposed to say it's red. The criteria is not obvious, so I don't know. I just feel like this has happened.
Maybe I
Navin?
need to change, man. I didn't know the rules. I'm still learning. Okay, the reason I put it green is at Mayfield, we have been involved with this globalization with China and India. And not unlike you over the last 20 years, all our portfolio companies, even startups, are global, right? So it's a thing. The reason I put a green is the rise of Eastern Europe and the Balkans, which is truly showing that it's not just going to be India, China, Taiwan, and basically a few other pockets where call centers were like Philippines. It's going to be the rest of the world, and technology will be the great equalizer. But somehow the last point got deleted, that domestic tech industries will get built there in the next 20 years, and I'm a no on it. And the main reason is I've been investing in India for 20 years. Nothing has happened, right? So luckily, there's no big company which has come out of India that is, besides IT offshoring and other things, right? So it's something we can take offline, but that was not what was presented. So I still maintain I'm a green.
Very good.
Just to make her happy and remove the blood pressure.
As a former Googler, which I'm sure there are many of in the room, I could say not only did we take meetings with remote offices but on Google Hangouts, but we would do it with people in the next building to save time. And so I think the technology is certainly there. I think to me what is exciting to me and what I really agree with is these new sort of technology hubs popping up in other parts of the world. And I hear what Navin's saying. It may not be that we're going to have the next Silicon Valley in Eastern Europe. However, you know, I look at what Andel has done in sub-Saharan Africa with training up talent and placing them, you know, with global companies. I see what's happening in Brazil with Nubank becoming a major player and will likely produce a lot of really high-quality talent and new companies. And I think that this is just the beginning of seeing sort of massive change in these markets that, frankly, have not been a big part of our story from a technology perspective to date.
So I think a couple things. So one on the already obvious. So I've been in venture for 11 years now, and what we still are sort of seeing is you'll outsource your scaling to Argentina or your QA to Russia, or you'll take a piece of it, right? And very few companies right now are already sort of truly international. They're kind of taking pieces that are more tertiary items and popping them somewhere else. What we have seen just happen, I mean, in the last pretty short time period is the entire dev team sitting in Poland, the entire dev team is sitting in Estonia, the entire dev team is in Portugal, and now we're actually moving marketing there too. And so, you know, we used to see sort of, you know, QA, scaling, things like that, and then you started seeing engineering efforts going over, and now you're seeing like core accounting, marketing, functionality, and you're seeing companies like Zapier being 100% remote. And it used to be if VCs saw that, you know, and they said, oh, well, the team needs to be in Silicon Valley and we need to sort of like be able to touch everyone. They would, I mean, even a couple years ago, you know, they would say that. And even today, I would say a lot of people would say that. And now it's actually just beginning to feel like it's acceptable. And I think as we go in the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be the norm that we're like, you know, where are you going to put your teams? Where are you going to put your marketing team? Where are you going to put your dev team? And this notion of distribution is what people want.
Very good. Out to the audience for a vote. It's kind of a nail biter on this one.
Yeah.
This is a good one.
Thank you, Navin.
It reminds me of something Bill Joy said a long time ago when he predicted in the early 90s, before the web was existed as we know it today, that when we had the web, when we had a proliferation of the internet, when we had high-speed networks, he said the majority of the smartest people will not be within your company. In other words, they'd be distributed around the world.
Oh yeah, something just for fun. So a few years ago, when Marissa took over Yahoo, it was really funny because she didn't know where most of the people were. Like, she actually had sort of this like work from home policy, and she actually had to like make people, if you all remember that headline, like you had to actually come in and check in because she didn't know where a lot of those people were. I don't know if most was true, but a lot of them. But today, like all these software platforms have taken over to where you're tracking everything people are doing. So you don't have that issue anymore.
That's great. All right, at 53 to 47 in agreement. So thanks and good job. On to the next.
All right, this one is Lauren's. Trend number 7, a democratized network of trust. Driven by technological advances, increasing regulation around privacy, and consumer demand for both personalization and efficiency, a massive network of verified identity will make all of our digital activities more seamless and secure. This network will connect new clearinghouses that verify our most important attributes without unnecessary redundancy. Well, from your lips to God's ears, tell us more.
So the internet was built to identify endpoints on a network, not humans. But as internet services have proliferated, we as end users are buried in passwords, and we spend meaningful time verifying and re-verifying ourselves online. As our offline interactions are increasingly facilitated by online brokers who we rely on as arbiters of trust, we can't help but notice that many of them are failing. If you look at the news from care.com recently, it's pretty terrifying. 9 times in the last 6 years, caregivers in the US were put on the platform with police records for alleged crimes including theft, child abuse, sexual assault, and murder. And later, those 9 people were accused of committing crimes while caring for children and the elderly. These online marketplaces need help. And we've seen a trend towards some seamless identity experiences with federated accounts. So if you think of Facebook Connect or Shopify Pay for universal checkout, we're starting to see what's possible when you can use a singular login or payment credentials across the internet. But these are insufficient. We don't trust Facebook or Shopify with our most important identity attributes. We need a company or a group of companies built from the ground up on trust and security. And never has there been more need for this or more opportunity. A new network of verified identity and identity attributes circulated around trusted clearinghouses is going to come together, and it's going to be driven by tech advancements like zero trust security, proliferation of APIs, computer vision and ML, advanced biometrics, et cetera. And the regulatory environment is helping to drive it forward too with increasing privacy regulation. So it's time for this identity layer to exist for the internet. What does that look like in practice? So when Patty gives me my open water credential for scuba diving, it would get logged into a network such that the next time I go to a dive center, they can look up that I'm open water certified. And then when I do a dive with that dive center, they can record it against my more advanced certification. Even my experiences have value as part of my identity. If I want them to, HBO could verify that I watched season 8, episode 5 of Game of Thrones on Sunday, so that all the content apps on my phone can send me notifications about how the series just burned itself to the ground. So for all of my own identity data, I should have visibility into it, and third parties who want to access it should be allowed to do so by me, on a need-to-know basis with as little underlying data as possible. You can even imagine this with the State Department at some point in time, probably not in the next 5 years, but verifying my passport information so that the hotel I stay at doesn't need my actual passport copy.
Okay, we need to wrap up. Your 30 seconds over. So, panelists, hold your paddles high.
But Lauren, I give you credit for interjecting Game of Thrones for some
Yeah.
cheap votes. So
Sorry,
it's
I
pretty
missed
good.
the bell. I was so into Game of Thrones, I missed the bell. Apologies.
Greenie, all right. Hold it high. There you go.
High.
Three
strong.
against.
Yeah, I detect some sympathy
Yeah,
vote
it might
there
be a
from
sympathy
Jeff.
no.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, since you were the last one up, you're going to be the first to make your comments.
I had to really. I think Lauren describes a massive problem, and in fact, Tom Tungus described the hunt for authenticity last year as a very similar kind of, I think, not the exact same, but similar kind of issue. And I actually think we have to solve this problem. I think we have to solve this identity problem. Maybe I debate on the timing is, does it get solved in the next 5 years in the way that Lauren was describing it? But to me, I think this idea, and I think a lot of it could end up being based on blockchain, which is going to be this immutable record about kind of who you are and what you've done and what you've earned and where you've. I think that is going to ultimately come to pass, and maybe it's just a question of timing. But there's too many forces behind this that driving the need for this solution, and so I think it'll happen, which is why I was agreeing.
Okay, Navin?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this problem needs to be solved. But as you say, right, like when you've been in the business too long, you just get colored. Honestly, we have tried everything, from decentralized computing to wallets to God knows any other thing. And the only thing I can think about where this is going to get solved is by interference from government. And if you look at what's happening in Europe with GDPR, what's happening with CCPA in California, those are some of going to be the drivers. But even if we create yet another middleman, it's back to the same Facebook problem, right? So if truly decentralization doesn't happen, and that's in its infancy, right? Like it's the biggest hype, right? Like basically that exists. So my feeling is this has to be done in public-private cooperation. Governments have to step in. EU is looking at it. California is looking at it. There will be solutions, but to do this without the government, who anyways wants every information on us, is going to be just very, very hard.
Okay.
And this is not China.
We need
talking
to
about
get
the US.
Brian and Rebecca in. Brian?
Yeah, I want this to happen. It is a timing question. The centralized approach is counter to the privacy trends. Government, like, we'll be waiting forever for them to figure this out. Decentralized is going to wait for blockchain, and that just feels more than 5 years away. And then lastly, this is a complicated concept for consumers to really grok, and I'm going to it sounds like a lot of work and effort, and so far the way we give away our identity and privacy in order to use social media, it just seems like most people don't care enough.
Rebecca?
Yeah, so just echoing a little bit of Brian, it's totally counter to the privacy trends, and I was almost sort of having flashbacks of China's sort of social credit system, right, which could, kind of fold in, which is a little bit terrifying. I think it goes counter to the GDPR and all the privacy things that we're seeing in the market today. And the other thing too is, there are things that we all wish could happen. I mean, just like the Care.com issue, that's something that's been in existence for forever. And the problem is city, state, and local crime databases are not centralized. And neither, by the way, is your doctor's medical malpractice record. You can kill a lot of patients in one state and just go to the next one. And so, sorry. So it's really amazing. Even it's not Game of Thrones, but like really important, like life and death stuff, is not centralized at this point in time. And so I would hope we'd start there and then go beyond it.
All right, Lauren, a minute to answer your critics.
Yeah, so I think these are all fair criticisms, and in trying to present a vision, I think what is missing from the description is the path to get there, and I think that's the most important. So to me, it's a big distribution problem, right? Consumers don't adopt this on their own. You need to find a hook into the market, and you need to find a hook into the market that is not highly regulated. So that's why, verified passport information is much further out. What I think is much shorter term is verified work credentials. It's It's background checks, which Rebecca's right. Those databases are extremely distributed. Some of them still live offline, but that can be addressed by technology today. And I don't think you need the data stored in a centralized system. I think end users can choose where they want it stored, whether they want to store it themselves or in other third-party databases.
All right, audience, now it's your turn. I bet if you, I bet it would flip if you said people want to agree. I think everybody overwhelmingly wants to agree, but maybe there's too much cynicism here, maybe too much skepticism.
Well, the privacy thing is an issue. I think that might be the reflection. Looks like we're locked on that now.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're locked on that one. 60, whoop, last vote. Oh, a couple more.
We got 7 seconds here. You had it right, we were locked.
All right, that's it. 61-39 against on that one. Where are we? At trend number 8 already. Digital technology makes positive inroads on mental health. Over the last 5 years, heavy use of smartphones and our frenetic, always-on culture have been cited as causing increases in depression, anxiety, and isolation. Digital technology fights back, from texting with your remote therapist to machine learning unique combinations of therapeutic problems and response. Digital technology democratizes access to effective mental health treatment. Jeff?
Over 1/4 of the US population suffers from anxiety or depression. And only a very small percent of that group gets treated. It's even more serious among college students, among the Gen Z crowd and millennials. It's getting worse. As Brian pointed out earlier, I would agree. I mean, I think social media is exacerbating this. Why is it that only a small percentage gets treated today? It is because it is too expensive to get help. Visiting a therapist once a week costs $150, $200, $250. There's too much stigma associated with getting help. You can't afford to leave work or let anybody know what you're going to do. And it's not timely. Oftentimes you have a crisis. If any of you have ever had folks with depression or anxiety in your families, among your loved ones, you know it's very hard to wait till next Thursday to see somebody. Cognitive behavioral therapy is actually proven statistically in many, many, many studies to be very, very effective. It's the delivery mechanism that just works for too few people who can afford it. I actually speak from experience. I have a wife who is a clinical psychologist. I think the way that this happens is that digital technology now makes it possible to basically interact with therapists on a 24/7 basis. I'm not talking about video conferencing with your therapist. I'm actually talking about a new modality, which is texting with a remote therapist. Many people in this room might say, texting? What? Texting with your therapist? Does that even work? Is that even a thing? It turns out it is a thing. And studies at Duke and Columbia have shown that it is actually more effective for certain populations than actually speaking to the therapist, certainly as effective. And it's available 24/7. It's available at 1/4 of the cost. And it turns out to be broadly and very timely. What's going to happen from there? And so this is already become very prevalent. Consumers are doing this already today. You're going to see this available in your workplaces. It has already now just been rolled out within the last month to all employees at Google. This is going to be rolled out as a benefit because companies want to make sure that their employees have good mental health. Ultimately, there is going to be technology then used to enhance this. For the first time in human history, you're going to have a database of machine-readable, anonymized, but machine-readable data that is going to allow basically machine learning to figure out what works in the therapeutic give and take process. First time ever. This has never been done before. And that's going to allow basically software to instruct the therapists who over time are texting back and forth with their patients as to why don't you try this? Take this approach. This is going to work better. You're going to start to see AI-assisted therapy in ways that you've never seen before in conjunction with this remote text-based therapy. And I believe this will be a prevalent trend over the next 5 years.
Thanks, Jeff. Vote, panelists, raise them high. 1, 2, 3, 3 to 1 against. Rebecca, why don't you?
It's a
Give
tough crowd tonight.
Yeah, so I do, so we're in a company called Vita, and I do see this AI-driven therapy. I'm anxious to hear what they say. I will say depression and anxiety. I just had a lunch with a professor today, and her issue was that, and it was a vitamin D deficiency. So I think it goes back to functional medicine. And
Still plugging for that vote.
And studies have shown that omega-3 in high doses work better than antidepressants.
Whose
and
session
actually
is this? What are we
make
doing?
antidepressants work better.
She's adding a minute to her presentation. No, good work. Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when I think about the professions that can be automated effectively, this is about the last one on my list. I think that there is something so inherent to the human contact around therapy. I think there is a role for the internet to play in matching of therapists and in video or even phone delivery of care, but I think it's dangerous to offer a solution that kind of delays effective treatment. So the idea that someone that has anorexia or PTSD could be served by someone on text message, it's scary to me. And I think there's a lot of murkiness in the regulatory environment around it, and I think that that's going to come to the forefront in the not too distant future around this category.
Navin?
Yeah, I think the technology for this and the use case exists. Now you might say we are biased. We have invested in a bunch of telemedicine companies, and this is the only area which couldn't get to mass market adoption. And the main reason after we studied for it was the digital devices are the problem themselves. People in one window are talking to their whoever their consultant is, in the other window are chatting to their friends. But what we realized more and more is people really want to see their specialist. This is not, I have a cold, right? Like, give me a medicine, I have a rash, let me take care of it. And then the other big problem was the business model. For this to get into mass market, who's going to pay, right? Are the consumers going to pay or the insurance going to pay? And you start hitting scale limits. So for this, the idea is good. There'll be early adopters, but at least we haven't seen mass market adoption of this trend. For this particular case, for telemedicine, there have been other cases, not in mental health. The low-hanging fruit is happening.
Yeah, I have similar reasons. I mean, all of the telemedicine providers offer this as a service. Teladoc, Doctor on Demand, MD Live, American Well, they all have partnerships with the major health plans, and they're offered through your employer. It's the easy one, right? You don't have to see a patient, you're just talking. But adoption rates have been low. I do like your idea around evidence-based therapy. Let's actually see what the data says is working. But again, until you get the massive scale of usage, it's going to be really hard to close those feedback loops in any predictive way.
Rebuttal.
Can I
Go
have
ahead.
at it?
Yes.
So when I first described this to my wife, who's a psychologist, she had the exact same reaction Lauren had. You got to have face-to-face. It will never work otherwise. My daughter just got her PhD in clinical psychology as well. I'm surrounded by it at the dinner table. My daughter said, this will work. My generation will use this. So this rolled out in JetBlue. You know how many people, JetBlue employees, are using this service right now? 16% in the first 2 months. Think about that. So for those people who said this isn't going to happen, it is happening right now.
How many are pilots?
What?
I think he's saying we're old.
And the point is,
we're old.
this is not video conferencing with a therapist. This is texting with your therapist as you're feeling, and your therapist is texting back. This turns out to be a thing, and it is now rolling. There's tens of thousands of consumers using this. This is not televideo with a psychiatrist. This is actually happening today. So I would argue that there are popular misconceptions. Consumers are using this in droves, and this is why now all the big insurance companies, are signing up for this to provide this as not just EAP, employee assistance. This is actually becoming a mental health benefit. Google ran a pilot at YouTube with this. Google ran a pilot at YouTube, and they saw the uptake at YouTube like nothing they had ever seen in either telemedicine or mental health. And that's because, I don't see many millennials in this audience, but millennials and the Gen Zers are into this in a big way. Sorry if I insulted the millennials. Sorry if I insulted millennials.
All right, well, let's go to the audience here. What's the vote?
Not buying it.
Doing well, man.
You're doing well.
I liked it.
Wow, look at this surge.
Oh, wait. The millennials are kicking in.
Yes,
Thank you.
they're kicking in
The
now.
Marvin here. Come on, vote millennials. Vote millennials. Prove your elders wrong.
Yes, exactly. I thought there'd be a little bit of a connection with Lauren's idea that you would need verified identity if you're going to go therapy on text, right?
Let's go.
Silicon,
Let's go.
There you go.
We're down here in the
This is
valley.
actually not
Again,
for
I'll get hit
PTSD,
by
by the
3
way.
years.
Not
No, I know.
Jeff, which
But I'm not only going to give examples of 3
is
years.
it Talkspace? Yeah.
Oh, they got it.
No, the 3 years I'm going to give it.
You got the momentum.
You turned them there with that millennial comment.
Thank
that was
you.
pretty
Yeah.
good.
Keep voting, millennials. Keep voting. Don't stop.
We need
All
you,
you
man.
beautiful
Vote early. Vote often.
All right, 3,
Jeff for
2,
president.
I'm a
1.
millennial.
Votes are in at 54 to 46. Very good.
Nice.
Nice work.
Trend number 9, I think this is a big one and one I've been waiting to hear Navin talk about. The renaissance of silicon will create industry giants. All right, take it away, Navin.
Absolutely.
Don't you wanna read
How
it
many
out?
people?
Whoa.
Sorry.
Yeah, I got to read this. I was so anxious. I got to preface it. Just give me 2 sentences here.
Hey, don't take my time.
With the end of Moore's law,
give you your time
with the end of Moore's law, new semiconductors are required for a cloud-native, data-dominated, AI-powered IoT world. The rise of these new players will put the silicon back into Silicon Valley. Navin, over to you.
Absolutely. How many people in the room work in the silicon industry? Because I just want to see people if they understand even Moore's law. How many people work?
Navin, does it count if the Churchill Club's first ever speaker was Bob Noyce back in
Oh,
1985?
Awesome. My time. Okay. So, so I think I need to get back 10 seconds, but
Yes,
it's okay.
we'll give you 10.
So let's talk about the trend, right? So I'm personally very excited to see silicon coming back to Silicon Valley and taking us back to our roots. As you know, silicon is the ingredient of the information technology industry. Nothing can happen in any field without silicon. In the last, can we put the slide up? In the last 40 to 50 years, there was something called the Moore's law, where processor speed doubled every 18 months. And what's happened is the x86 era, everything converged into a single CPU where all functions happened on one chip and software was good enough. But today, if you go to the center column, we are hitting a plateauing of the Moore's law due to limitations in physics, due to limitations in size, limitations in clock size, clock speeds. You can't double the CPU processing power every 18 months. So is the Valley going to give up performance? No, we are not. We're all driven by price and performance. So what is going to happen? We're going to see a flowering of silicon architectures where the CPU will still exist and do what it does well, but it will be surrounded by other components. We have already seen that with the rise of GPUs with NVIDIA, a $100 billion market company. We have seen the rise of FPGAs, Intel buying Altera for $17 billion, SmartNICs, basically NVIDIA bought Mellanox for $6.9 billion. So in today's world, 32 seconds plus 10 extra I need to get. Basically, I predict a few silicon things will happen. The first one I predict is a company which is already in product. It's the founder of Juniper Networks, because the 3-5-year rule I need to remember is a company called a data processing unit. Data speeds and usage are growing 100x due to apps like Netflix and YouTube. CPUs are terrible for handling data-intensive applications. These applications will run on the DPU. Similarly, there'll be an emergence of AI and ML chipsets, which the general purpose CPU ain't going to be able to do. Intel just invested in Samba Nova, they invited Nirvana, and similarly, there will be special purpose semis for ultra low power IoT applications. In a nutshell, there'll be many, many silicon companies which will get created, which will reinvent the IT industry, and I'm proud of the entrepreneurs and the companies in the room who are working on getting silicon back into Silicon Valley. Thank you.
All right, let's see those paddles raised high.
Ooh, all right.
That's good.
Okay, well, let's start with the critics down on this end. Rebecca, have at it.
Oh, me first? Yeah, I mean, I think they're getting silicon back in Silicon Valley is an interesting concept. I think there's a lot of people, very few people here who probably remember that to some extent. And I don't know if I don't know.
There are more millennials than we thought.
Yeah, I mean, you look at these investments, and I have a couple actually in the older portfolios that are like there, but it's such a hard slog. It's so capital intensive still, and it's just a tough place to do it out here. It's not the most efficient place in the world to the best teams in the world, right? But not the most efficient place to do it.
Yeah. So I agree that this is going to play the GPUs and more advanced chip technology around AI is going to play a really important role for us. But in terms of building sort of big businesses, to me, a lot of the stickiness will exist on the provisioning and management layer. And so if you have chip companies coupled with that software, I maybe can buy into it. I think that's kind of where NVIDIA is going. But otherwise, I think that the big businesses around new silicon technology will be built at the software layer, really around deploying, because deploying AI and machine learning models is much more complex than traditional software, and that's where I think you're going to find the hardest problems and the stickiest problems.
Yeah.
Jeff.
So I certainly don't think that silicon, the next wave of silicon companies will end up being necessarily as big and impactful, certainly as, say, the Intels of the world. But I would agree with Navin that we are seeing, I think, a proliferation now of companies for doing data processing units or doing silicon for AI. We've invested in a low-power chipset for IoT that is just going gangbusters. So you can see for the applications of the prevalent applications of tomorrow, I think have to take advantage of high-performance silicon that is purpose-built for those functions. And so there are going to be a collection of companies that do that. Maybe they don't get to the size of an Intel as an example, but I think they're going to be important companies. That's why I voted green.
Brian.
Yeah, I think with the edge computing trend, we're back to the future, and every device will have silicon in it. And I think I take your point quite literally. Like, we're not saying that it's going to be easy to create chip startups all of a sudden, but the opportunity will be there, market size there for a few brand new behemoths.
All right.
Okay. Nobody took
They
my
were so quick, you can have a full 2 minutes here.
Absolutely, right? So
Because I know you will take it.
I would love to. So I think first of all, right, like this innovation is not only about startups. If you look at every big cloud company and and I didn't say this is about startups. Every big hyperscaler, Amazon is building chips. Google is building chips. Facebook is building chips. Microsoft is building chips. It's impossible to retain doubly engineers in startups today. Look at Apple. Doesn't buy products from anybody, the chips. It's all built in-house. So the amount of innovation, which was my point, which was happening in Silicon Valley, had stopped 20 years back. Now it remains to be seen how much of it happens in the big companies, because they've already realized we hear software has eaten the world. It actually did. It's finished. You need to innovate on the hardware side too. You're reaching limitations of what CPUs can do. They are good at certain things for running application code. They're bad at running everything else. Why is Qualcomm 100 billion? Why is NVIDIA 100 billion? Why is Broadcom 100 billion? I would love software companies to be worth 100 billion. My partner Rajiv can count on his hands how many software companies are worth 100 billion, right? And then my question to the venture community is, I understand it's been hard to fund silicon companies, but I think that's a thing of the past. $130 billion got invested last year. If VCs, if we can't even provide capital, what are we doing? I think like we need to get into the real estate business maybe, or the hedge fund business.
We are.
So I think my call to people is, if they understand anything about physics, if they understand anything about technology, go back to the basics, right? We have taken the easy route of taking shortcuts, but it's time back to go back to the basic, solve innovative problems in physics and sciences, and there's enough money available.
Okay,
Remember, there's SoftBank Vision Fund.
Let's see what the audience has to say.
Woo!
That, Navin,
They have a winner.
the audience loved it.
Nice.
I'm strongly in your favor on this one. One of my mentors in the early days at Forbes was George Gilder. We worked together on a lot of long pieces that he wrote, and I was his editor.
Thanks, man.
He's got a book called Life After Google, and he writes about companies like Bitmain in China that was really built to power crypto mining. But crypto may be in a winter and it may not emerge, who knows. But some of the silicon that emerged out of the effort to mine faster rates is pretty darn interesting.
They loved it.
Well, that constitutes tonight's first runaway winner. Woo. Congratulations,
Nice
Navin.
job, Navin.
It was that extra 10 seconds, I think. That was pretty good. Very
That was the
convincing.
lucky charm.
Very good.
You helped me. You helped me.
All right, trend number 10, our final trend of the night, is federal defense and intelligence budgets will dramatically unlock for startups. Cyber warfare is at DEFCON 1. Our democracy has been breached. Traditional military industrial contractors lack the software skills and agility to counter the threat, while big tech companies are held back by picketing employees. Startups will fill the gap. Brian, tell us about this one.
All right. Well,
ambitious
the
one.
United States is under relentless cyber attack from our foreign adversaries. Military networks and systems have been breached. Secrets have been stolen, as was our last presidential election. Modern warfare has shifted from tanks, planes, and ships to software, data, autonomous systems, and AI. Cyber attacks are an existential threat to democracy. The U.S. Department of Defense budget for 2019 is $687 billion, of which $50 billion is for software and information technology. Traditional military contractors like Raytheon, Lockheed, Northrop Grumman have been around since World War II. And if you give them $10 billion in a decade, they'll build a great aircraft carrier. But world-class software is not their thing. And historically, VCs have advised their portfolio away from the government due to opaque bureaucracy, long sales cycle, barriers to selling direct, complicated requirements and contracting procedures. But my prediction is that defense and intelligence will emerge as viable tech market opportunities over the next 5 years. Yet at exactly the moment that our nation needs Silicon Valley technology to help defend itself, world-class tech companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft have their employees picketing against doing business with the US defense. A small but vocal minority with the power to coerce Google to drop out of projects like JEDI, which is a $10 billion program. Over the last 18 months, I've started to see Defense Innovation Unit, SOCOM, Navy SEALs show up on customer logo slides and startup pitch decks. And these entrepreneurs are almost sheepish about admitting it because most VCs shoo them away. But we think over the next 5 years, we'll see tech startups in cybersecurity, AI, and autonomy develop strategies and go-to-market playbooks to tap into the massive national defense budget and serve our nation in its time of need.
All right, as the last one, we'd allowed it to go over for a few moments, so go to a vote. Panelists?
Man,
Is this a split again? Well, a three to one, I think. Yep, okay. Why don't we start down with Navin? Why are you green?
The reason I'm green is this is a big need, and I think it's going to create opportunities for companies all across. The only thing we need to watch is, can the startups actually win this business, or are they going to be dependent upon the big contractors and the big cloud providers, because they are the ones who are going to own the account. But since the prediction is there's opportunity for startups, absolutely. How much of it goes to them versus the big cloud providers and the big integrators is unknown to me. But opportunity exists.
Yep, Jeff?
So I voted red for basically the exact same analysis that Navin just had, which is I think the defense budgets are controlled by the very large contractors and the very, very large defense companies. And I think it is really, really hard for startups to penetrate that world. I think there will certainly be some activity on the fringes, but I think as a mainstream trend, making a major, major dent in where defense dollars are going over the next 5 years, well, I'd like that to be the case because I certainly agree with the problem statement. I just don't see startups breaking through just massive labyrinth of these defense contractors, consulting organizations, and large companies who really have a stranglehold on the defense budget. So I just don't see the startups breaking through.
Lauren?
Yeah, so I'm actually right in between the two of you. I would say I think it's really unlikely for startups to become kind of full stack defense contractors. I think Palantir was a complete anomaly in that sense for lots of reasons. But I do think that, and I believe that the defense contractors more broadly will continue to own this market. But I think that there will be technology solutions developer platforms that get put into the solutions being aggregated by the defense contractors that are really meaningful and without which won't solve these problems. So, for example, like deep fake detection technology, I don't think that's going to be built inside Lockheed. I think that's going to come from Silicon Valley or beyond and plug in, or similarly like an AR visualization layer for drones. I think that will come from startups, but via an SDK will be plugged into to the solution by defense contractors.
Oh, okay. Better stay on top of that.
Let's just say this will absolutely happen, and I don't know how much I can tell you. We've had companies that have quickly, in a matter faster than an enterprise software company can move, land, multi-million dollar deals directly with the government. We've had bigger deals come in, via defense contractors who desperately need this technology. It's ironic and a little hilarious to me that Google did what they did, given they think that money from Saudi and stuff is okay, but we won't go there. And so yeah, I think this is absolutely happening. And we looked at one of your companies pretty closely and know what's going on there. But the CIA is out here talking to a lot of companies all the time. They've devoted $600 million to the Amazon platform and others to get it sort of cloud-based. And there's a lot of effort in the government today because they need things like video and face detection. They can't handle things like the Vegas shooting happening again, and how long did it take them to get that tape together? And then what they can't rely on is China for it, right? So we need that technology, and if Google's not going to serve it, then somebody has to. So yeah, there's a huge opportunity for these companies, and the government's willing to come and just say how much.
Brian?
Yeah, I just think times are changing because the need is so acute. Palantir has done $1 billion in Defense Department contracts, and while the founders were special and had unique pedigree, the reason they got that money is because of the need was there.
They're trying to replace Palantir now. The government is coming out here saying, now we want to replace it.
We need other startups.
Do it again.
The primes won't go away, but they simply don't have the talent or the agility and can get these projects done on time. So they will subcontract out. And these contracts aren't $1 million contracts. They're tens. They're hundreds of millions. And they are being fast-tracked like never before because we're out of time. So I do think that it's a new day. And if you're ignoring this, it's at your own peril. Just this morning, I got an email from a former eBay employee saying he landed a big Air Force contract. I don't even know what that means yet.
Very good. Okay, out to the audience for a vote.
Boy, another strong one. I think I read somewhere where the first $1 billion of Silicon Valley's memory chips in the Silicon era were bought by DARPA or NASA. And without that early boost in the silicon industry, maybe Silicon Valley wouldn't have happened.
Siri was a government contract too. It's this Caleb
Good job,
project.
man.
Thanks, sir.
Siri started as a government
Siri
contract.
was the Caleb project. Yeah.
This is right on.
Out of the government.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, get your votes in. We're at the last 10 seconds. All right, that's a strong one, 70-34.
Okay, and now our supercomputer, powered by some of Navin's new chip companies, are tallying the ultimate results to reveal the overall winner. Let's take a look at that.
They've already done them.
Oh, they have.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
It's the DPU. The DPU did that.
Yeah, right.
Well, the wizard wand. Yeah, do you want me to still talk about the wizard wand here? Okay.
Don't look.
Well, the winner is going to get a commissioned called a wizard wand created by the Acme Wizard Wand Supply
There you go.
Company,
Look
whose
at
slogan
that.
is, "When it's just you and the Prince of Darkness, only an Acme will do."
Actually, can I give it to somebody? I'll be very
Yeah.
dangerous with this.
You can present the wand.
Oh, that's beautiful, yes.
The wand is fashioned of blue and white celluloid with sterling silver accents and a
Oh, it's
crystal
small.
sphere end cap.
No, I don't worry.
You can't hurt anyone with
Yeah.
that. You can,
I was worried with the anger. Thank you. Thank you.
Very good, Navin.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
and Navin, if anybody ever doubts you on one of your funding decisions at Mayfield, you pull out your wizard wand and you say that you see the future.
Absolutely. I have an LP meeting coming up next week. I'm going to now do this.
And if they just still disagree, you'll poke them with it.
No, that I won't do. That I
That was
won't
a
do.
well done one.
Oh, gold star. Well, Mike and I had already decided we were going to award the gold star to number 9 anyway, the revival of Silicon and Silicon Valley. And so I think it's almost redundant at this point, but I'll do it anyway. It kind of pales in comparison to the fine wizard wand that you just won.
Okay.
Now you're a double winner.
Thank you.
Lauren, I will tell you, I voted for your fertility one, but Rich is a Silicon Valley guy through and through. So,
So I think your Bob noise thing really helped. I think we brought the tradition back. The first speaker, probably I'm coming here the last time.
We're coming full circle with Bob Noyce.
well, that's great. Well, that is our evening, ladies and gentlemen. We got
Well done. Well done.
Congratulations.
Well, that was fun.